welcome to the TIFF press conference for Coriolanus. I'm Maria Rowley, the press conference manager. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items. Once we get everyone out from the film standing on the podium, there'll be about a minute or so of flash photography. And then after that, as per our email, only the pre-approved wire photographers are allowed to stay during the press conferences. So yes, so that's Wire, Getty, CP, and AP. The other thing is, and Reuters, okay, so please keep the center aisles clear as well. And members of the media, please stand and identify yourself and your media outlet before you ask a question. The press conference is being streamed live at www.tiff.net/festival. And now it's my pleasure to welcome the producer, director, screenwriter, and cast of Coriolanus, as well as the moderator, Eric Kohanek. Thanks.
Together as a group? Everybody on this side, please. Thank you. Big smiles, guys. 1, 2, 3. We're going to work around. Yeah. We're in the middle. Right down my line. Right side. Oh, okay. Oh, you're a shame. And over to the right, guys. To the right. And everybody, it's everyone right here, please, where the hand is. Thank you. One more time down the line, please, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good morning. My name's Eric Kohanek. I'm the moderator for today's panel on Coriolanus. With us today, to my right, we have actor Brian Cox, who takes on the role of the Menenius, the advisor and friend of Coriolanus. Next to him, we have Jessica Chastain, who plays the role of the wife of Coriolanus, Virgilia. Next to Jessica, we have Gerard Butler, who takes on the role of Coriolanus's arch-evil enemy, Tullus Aufidius. And last but certainly not least, we have Ralph Fiennes, who directed the film and also takes on the title role of Caius Marcius Coriolanus. If you have any questions, please pop up your hands. We've got wonderful volunteers in orange shirts who will get you a microphone. Stand up and state your name and your affiliation, and then we'll go from there. We might as well jump right in.
Hi, Laszlo from Australia and Hungary. Question to Ralph Fiennes. I'm wondering where you stand when it comes to the different theories about the authorship of the Shakespeare plays.
You mean about the fact that Shakespeare might not have written the plays? I think it's a bit of a dead end of a discussion in the end, because I don't know that any of our reactions to the plays should be any different, because it might have been written by someone else. I don't know the reasoning, and I haven't followed the arguments behind why it should not be William Shakespeare from Stratford-on-Avon. I believe it is. I believe it was this young man from Warwickshire who was extraordinarily gifted and wrote these plays. But in the end, the plays stand alone, and we experience them as live pieces of drama, which work.
Well, Rafe, since the play is the thing, tell us, why Coriolanus? What made you choose Coriolanus as the play?
I think it was I played it on stage about 10 years ago, and it made a very deep impression on me. It's a play I think unquestionably always has resonance with the times we're in, and particularly now, I think, with so much uncertainty in the world, social upheaval, political upheaval, war, combat, and the constant tension between the nature of leadership and the voice of the people. And for me, it seemed to combine a continually resonant political thriller with a Greek tragedy at the center of it.
And could you talk a bit about the development of the screenplay and the idea to update it specifically using...
Yeah, the screenplay is a result of a great collaboration that I had with the screenwriter John Logan, who you will know from films like Gladiator and Aviator. And I pitched this idea of an updated version of Coriolanus to him, and he responded very enthusiastically and wrote this electric screenplay, which, with the result of our working together, we edited the text aggressively, but it's really his extraordinary visceral writing style, descriptive style on the page, which really, I think, was the first big step forward for the film to become a reality.
We have a question over here in the third row.
Hi, Fabian Weinthal for Latin America. I have a question for Ralph Fiennes. We have George Clooney here, Madonna later today. They're both directors. You are a director too. So what makes an actor a better director?
Better than who?
Other directors that are not actors.
I don't know. I think that for some actors, directing can become a natural progression. I think it's very hard to be you do a number of films, and I've found I became increasingly curious, and more than curious, about choices directors were making. The camera, the locations, the costumes, the whole working with Anthony Minghella particularly, who was very collaborative. I felt very included in the process, and I think possibly since that time, I felt this curiosity become more like a very strong urge. But I think for many actors, it's you're at the mercy of so many decisions. I think there's a point where you want to be the person making the decisions.
And how tough a sell is it then when you have Coriolanus? How difficult was that to convince the film industry to take a gamble on something like that?
It was a particularly difficult time economically, because we were trying to make it just after the big crash in 2008, where there was no confidence at all in any market, particularly the film market, and it was always going to be a difficult sell. I think but as I was saying, John Logan's screenplay was so dynamic, so clear. So to anyone who picked it up, it was a page turner, and I think that gave the beginning of sort of confidence. And I worked with these three wonderful producers sitting in the front row here to make it possible: Julia Taylor-Stalley and Gabby Town and Colin Vaines, who had faith. So thanks to them, there was a film, and their determination. But I think it was just you keep plugging on, and eventually the pieces fall into place.
Okay, Gerard, maybe we'll toss it over to you for a sec to talk about Ephiticus and how you prepared for the role. Were you was it a difficult role to get into his skin and play that? And talk a bit about the chemistry that you and Rafe have on screen, both as combatants and obviously at short-term allies there, and how you portrayed that.
Well, as Rafe said, John Logan had did such a phenomenal job on the screenplay and really kind of clarifying what the story was and who the characters were. So it really kind of allowed it to. I felt like my character Ephiticus was really allowed to fly and say so much, and yet do it in such a kind of tight, controlled way. So I just did a lot of work with the text. I'm not being a major expert of Shakespeare, although my first professional engagement was actually in Coriolanus in the West End, but just as one of the spear chuckers, as they say. I engaged a Shakespearean director, and we did a lot of, just a lot of work, a lot of talking about, the best ways to approach this character, and it just kind of gave me some more detailed background on him. And then myself, I've played these kind of roles before, from Beowulf to Leonidas, and this was just a more, it was interesting to climb into somebody who was a lot more cerebral, ambiguous, who just a lot more thoughtful and kind of sly in his thoughts, and just and make that work. And then coming onto set with Rafe was a dream. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm working with, I don't know if I've told, but Brian Cox is a big hero of mine, always has been. And then to have Rafe to ask you to, make a movie where you're going to stand alongside him was amazing. And since The Help, my God, I was like just jumping for joy when I saw Jessica yesterday. So really, to get involved with this was a dream. And then working with Rafe, it just, I remember my first day when and Brian, you should ask Brian what the experience was like with Rafe, because he sums it up so brilliantly. Really, but just what a phenomenal experience it is to work with this man. Both that combination of being an actor and director, and how well he utilized it in this film.
Well, Brian, what sort of experience was it like?
Rafe was unquestionably, I've worked with many fine directors, and he's up there in the top 5, no question, and quite near the top of that top 5. I think it's an astonishing debut of a director. I think his whole grasp of the story, the character, the vision of the film, every aspect of the film, every detail of the film was total. His rigor, his sense of discipline, and his performance as well was just, the whole package is remarkable. And I was completely overwhelmed by it, really. It was a gift of a role, and the Logan script, just because of the nuance of that script, makes it really very wonderful to play. And just the whole style of how we spoke the lines, and we didn't have to deal with the rhetoric. And Rafe was very strong about keeping the thing away. And also because he is an actor, and such a great actor, he really understood all the pitfalls of the acting pitfalls. So, but that aside, the impressive thing was his grasp of the vision of the film, the actual movement of the film, the use of the camera, about lenses. I have to say, I was very gobsmacked by the whole thing, really, because I didn't realize he had such incredible grasp, and he does, and it's a joy to work with him. He's a taskmaster, but he's a great taskmaster, and it's worth it. And I love his taskmastering. He does it better than anybody.
Jessica, maybe you can chime in on that. You've done some Shakespeare in your career. This is clearly totally different from the approach that would have been done in other projects. Can you talk a bit about your experience?
Well, I went to Juilliard and I studied Shakespeare for 4 years, but since I got out of school, I didn't have the opportunity to revisit any of the plays. And when I heard that Rafe was going to direct this, to me, it's like taking a master class, and that's why I wanted to be involved. I mean, I knew by looking at the script, all of my scenes were going to be with either Rafe or Vanessa Redgrave. And when I saw the cast developing, it's just everyone they're the best of the best. They're the top of their craft. And I knew I would learn a lot from it. And working with an actor who's so sensitive and so has such subtlety and passion in what they're doing, and being directed by that, it can't help but inspire the best performance out of you.
We've got a question in the audience, but before we go there, Rafe, can you just talk about the casting process, how you assembled such an amazing cast?
Well, the first, she's not, sadly can't be here, but Vanessa Redgrave, who plays the mother of Coriolanus, Volumnia, was, I knew I wanted her from day one. She's of course one of the great actresses ever, but she's always moved me profoundly as a spirit, as an acting spirit. And I felt that she as you know, has great conviction not only in her work but in her principles and her beliefs. And I felt that it would be amazing to have someone who carries conviction like that so profoundly play Volumnia, whose convictions are quite challenging for us to share. I mean, they're essentially authoritarian and arguably, I suppose, a sort of a military, elitist nature. But she feels them profoundly, and you have to get inside the skin of that woman, and Vanessa did it. And, you know, well, I mean, like Jerry, I've been a fan of Brian for a long time, and I needed an actor of great stature to convey a sort of a political infighter and someone who has real sort of charisma and masculine weight as a politician. And I've seen Brian's work over the years, and he was the ideal choice for me. And I met Jessica. I was introduced to Jessica by someone who at one point was interested in financing the film. That didn't happen, but I met her having only seen, I think, a snippet of your Salome. And just on meeting her, I felt that there was this. Virgilia is a hard part because she doesn't have a lot to say, but she is the wife of Coriolanus, and she is present by, in fact, her silence. And Coriolanus calls her my gracious silence. And I think she is possibly the only character who I think carries love in the play. And I knew we needed someone with a effortless emotional translucence, and that's what this wonderful actress carries, which is why clearly Terence Malick cast her in Tree of Life. And I had the privilege of seeing Jessica play Desdemona on stage, and I think Desdemona is one of those parts where you have to have this quality, and it cannot be acted, and she had it, and until then I'd never seen it. So I've seen the best Desdemona ever here. And then this is a warrior. And I needed a warrior. And Jerry came and was determined to kick my ass with knives and guns. But a wonderful, I mean, I don't think I've ever told you this, but he has a wonderful scene in this film where he sees a murdered family in a car, and the effect of this is a sort of emotional high spot for Jerry's character. It's very disturbing, and he sort of has a sort of reactive rage to the sight of this his murdered family. And we were all, on the day we shot that, you could feel the electricity around the cast and the crew, this extraordinary emotional sort of flame that was happening. And I remember our line producer, when we wrapped, we were shooting until the light had gone, and Kevin, our line producer, said, "That's Shakespeare, baby."
We have a question in the back there.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Andrea Case, CTV News. 2 questions, if I may. Jessica Chastain, a year ago, it seems in the movie world, nobody knew your name. Now you are everywhere. How are you dealing with all of this? You toiled in the theater, you went to Juilliard, but how are you dealing with all of this? And Jerry, last night you had a great night. How did you get up this morning to do this? And can you talk about your connection to Toronto growing up?
That was a lot of bloody questions. You know? That's pretty much the rest of the press conference, I think. The rest of you can go. Who is? No, the first
Okay.
one.
Yes, this has been such a very strange year for me. It was a bit of a joke in my life where it was called the Chastain curse, where I made 11 films in 4.5 years, and for some reason they would be stalled or companies would be sold, and it just really it was a bit of a comedy. And then to have just the flip side of it, where they all now come out within 6 months of each other, it's really feast or famine in this business. And this whole press aspect of the business has been baptism by fire for me. But I guess the most wonderful thing is I love the films that I'm involved in. I feel really passionate about them. I've always chosen projects where I would be working with actors who are better than me, with teachers, with with people who had things to say. So I love to talk about these films. So for me, that has been the most wonderful part of it. Jerry.
So I had the gala screening of Machine Gun Preacher last night, and it's been, I think it's been one of those kind of career-defining moments for me. The screening went fantastic, and I'm very, very proud of the movie. I think it's a very powerful, remarkable piece of work. And last year was a time for me that I kind of stopped and said, okay, really, what do I want to do right now? And I took on a couple of challenges, challenged myself. I read this script. It's Coriolanus, Rafe directing and playing Coriolanus, and I thought, this is so delicious. It's terrifying. It's exciting. I want to go and do that. That's Shakespeare, baby. And seriously, and coming to work with these guys, and like I said before, Brian and Vanessa, and so that was great. And then off to do Machine Gun, a story of a drug addict biker who ends up down in Africa building an orphanage and becoming a preacher and fighting in a civil war. True story. It rips your heart out, and it went down a storm last night. So really, I got to say, even to think that this would be happening 2 days in a row, Coriolanus tonight, Machine Gun last night. But the effect of that was that I woke up this morning and I have never felt so exhausted in my life. And I literally thought, if I could die now, if somebody could just let me die, then I would take that option. I guess it's been just days and days of press for Machine Gun and now Coriolanus. But I got to say, when journalists have been coming in for the Machine Gun and going on about that, and then they'll suddenly go, oh, but Coriolanus! And it's like, wow. And I was going, which one do you like the best? Which one do you like the best? Rather than what I'm used to saying is, which one did you like the least? Right. So it's a good place to be.
Yeah, you're Toronto.
Oh, in Toronto. Yeah, it's great. No, I love it here. Listen, my father lived here. I've spent a lot of time in my life here. I used to come and spend 4 months in the summer. So he actually, my father had an umbrella store in the Queen's Quay terminal. He used to walk around with an umbrella hat on his head. If any of you guys have been here for a while, you might remember him. This crazy man with a maple leaf, Canadian flag, umbrella. I can't believe I'm telling you this. Anyway, I've spent a fair portion coming here, and this is the one problem with doing movies here is you're stuck in a room talking, just sitting in these bloody press conferences. When I want to be out walking the streets and experiencing this great city, because I love being here and I love the people.
Okay. We have a question down here and then over there.
Hello, Kinda Mardambe from Press Plus One. This is open to anybody up there. I wanted to know, I've seen actors who have performed Shakespeare on stage as well as in film, and I feel like there's a decided difference between how you perform to the camera and how you perform to the stage. Could you talk about that a little bit, please?
Well, the first difference I think is that on stage you have a space in which you have to be heard, and sometimes it's quite big, and you've got to convey sometimes a complex text, idea, speech to maybe 800, 900 people. So that's one set of skills, which is sort of vocal. And then on film, the camera can be in close, and you've got microphones. I mean, you can be intimate. Also, I think the test of Shakespeare on film is that, because too much words, too much language can sometimes not work on film. And so one of the things that I felt would help the audience's ear to engage would be a simplicity of delivery. I think Brian was touching on what I felt would be the more conversational it could be, except when there are arguably moments of extremis, when people are enraged or emotional, upset, but conversational. I mean, that's what you aim, funnily enough, that's what you aim for in the theatre, but sometimes you extend things because the physical demands are different. But intimacy and simplicity for film, for Shakespeare, I think, is the sort of guideline.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think that one of the great, powerful aspects of this film was the fact that there's a lot of rhetoric in the film, and the thing I learned is how little, I think, and I would apply it to even going back on stage, how little that you had to be rhetorical. I think sometimes when we're acting, we tend to kind of live up to it a little bit, which is a fault that we actors have. The great thing about working with Rafe and his desire to keep it conversational. But for me, the mark was set, the benchmark was set by Vanessa. Because listening to Vanessa in rehearsals with Rafe and watching her work and watching this wonderful kind of idiosyncratic simplicity that she has, she has a way of making a line sound like you've never heard it before. And it just meant, to me, it was so clear that was the way to go. That was the only way to go in this movie. And Vanessa, I don't know if Rafe agrees, but I think she's a very, very much a huge part of the spirit of this film. Simply, I mean, just working with her in rehearsals, and she was, you know, it was a very difficult time for Vanessa, considering her own private pain and what she'd been through. And you know, she is, in many ways, she can be a very deeply maligned woman, and I think it's wrong, because I think she's the consummate professional, absolute consummate professional, and her behavior in this film was exceptional, considering the stress that she was under. And her delicacy and her approach to the text and her relationship with Rafe, it was wonderful to be part of that and be kind of just sitting there listening to all that. And I think it really did set the marker for how Coriolanus is played, really. And it does come from the conversation of these two.
Rafe, can you talk a bit more about the rehearsal process? How extensive?
Well, we did. I mean, ideally, I would have loved a week plus rehearsals before, but because everyone's schedules, you know, you're dovetailing people's availability. I didn't. So we rehearsed at weekends. We had a 5-day week, but on our second day off, we would rehearse. I just thought it was, in a way, I mean, we're in a room around a table sometimes, just get a chance for everyone to read their lines and hear each other. Yeah, I didn't.
When you're preparing a stage play, the rehearsal process is so extensive, and you did not have that luxury. How was that for the other actors? Maybe Gerard and Jessica, you can weigh in on that too.
Well, we're consummate professionals. You know, we can make do in any situation. No, actually, the fight that we had, Rafe, which to this day remains the closest thing to a homosexual experience that I've had, and it might be a career-changing scene for both of us. We had a good rehearsal period for that. Yeah,
we rehearsed that fight very, very exhaustively.
It doesn't really work, that statement, after I've just said what I've said. We really felt a need to rehearse that fight a lot and exhaustively. No, but that was an example of a. But you know, but it's interesting because we had the stuntmen laid out a really interesting fight, which, to be honest, Rafe and I basically said, this is not it, you know. It's just so much more about two guys that want to rip each other apart, which is what I think is so great. And in some ways, there's such complexity to this film, and in other ways, there's such simplicity. And that's what's great about John Logan's screenplay. Is it's so cinematic, it's stripped down, and allows you to, you know, really to feel the story, especially because it's Shakespeare. It feels incredibly accessible, and you feel very involved when you read it and when you watch it. And you, none more so than that moment when I think the two of us face off against each other and we said, forget the stunts, it's just two guys looking at each other so full of hate that they just want to eat each other's brains, you know, and like rip each other apart. And we kind of, that's where we went from. That's how our that's how our rehearsal started, was how do we rip each other's eyes out? And action.
I think one of the things about if you don't have rehearsal, some just don't have the time. I mean, the time you do have is really a chance for everyone, I think, to meet in the space, if you can, where you're going to shoot. Say lines, just be be clear in the most simple way, because what I think, I worked with the director Istvan Sabo, and it made an impression on me that he was very protective that the actor didn't ever commit to performance in rehearsal, that he wanted to keep it for the camera. So I think film rehearsal should be quite, I feel like there's no hard and fast rule, but they can be quite light and simple, just so people get to listen to each other, make eye contact, and you just help them as to where physically they are, what choices they have.
When I arrived, because we didn't have much rehearsal, but when I first arrived, they had started filming, and it was filming the fight scene actually when Rafe is absolutely covered in blood and just all you see is his eyes, and we scheduled a lunch to talk about the relationship between Virgilia and Coriolanus, and I'm just off the plane, and I'm thinking, okay, let's talk about this. And I show up, and he shows up in costume, completely covered in blood, and we're eating, and I'm not very talkative, and actually you said to me, like, are you all right? You said, you're very quiet, is everything okay? And I was like, do you know what you look like right now?
I forgot, and you're a vegetarian, aren't you?
We have a question over here.
Hello, Juan Carlos Garcia from Mexico. A question for Mr. Butler. Do you feel more comfortable working on comedy films, romantic films, action films, dramatic? What makes you feel more comfortable?
What makes a film what?
More comfortable working, what kind of roles? In what kind of roles do you feel more comfortable working on romantic?
What makes a film more comfortable?
Yeah, sorry for my pronunciation.
I think I understand what you're saying now, but I don't understand what makes a film more comfortable?
What
What roles do you find more
what kind of
comfortable?
movie am I most comfortable in?
Right.
Sorry. See, you should be asking other people questions. It's not easy when you come to me. I don't know what kind of roles I'm most comfortable in. I wouldn't. I was surprised how comfortable I was in Shakespeare, having played other roles that kind of make a stab at some form of stylized language, slightly classical and other plays, but especially films that I've done. And that was kind of one stepping stone in going towards Shakespeare that I found it much easier to broach than I thought it would. But to be honest, this has been a year for me trying to step into areas that I don't necessarily feel comfortable in, going into kind of edgy, more dramatic, grittier roles, and Shakespeare itself. So, I'm actually asking the opposite question now, is where can I go that I don't feel so comfortable, but I'm going to learn something.
Another question way in the back.
Yes, hi, Stephen Holt from the Stephen Holt Show in New York. I want to say, I'm a bardolater, and Coriolanus has never really been taken seriously as one of Shakespeare's best plays, but this is one of the best movies ever made from Shakespeare, I think. I was blown away. I thought I knew it, and I think I always felt this was Shakespeare's play about mom, like he was writing about his mother finally in this play. And Volumnia, in your version, becomes one of the great Shakespearean villainesses, I think, up there with Lady Macbeth. But the whole movie seemed really focused on Coriolanus and Mom, and who was going to win. And of course, we know the answer to that question. Were you trying to do that?
Well, I think all the sort of narrative and dramatic strands of the piece all lead to this confrontation between the mother and the son. Everything about it leads. You can feel it in the writing. For all the political discussions and negotiations and the intensity, even with Ophidius, they all, in the end, they're like converging roads that lead to this sort of umbilical confrontation between a mother and a son. And that's, in the end, that's what's always moved me about the piece. When I first saw it, I remember weeping at that scene. So it is central, yeah.
Rafe, one of the things that really struck me about the film was your use of very contemporary icons, camera phones. These days you can't do anything without showing up on YouTube. Talk a bit about the idea to include that sort of thing, which really contemporized it a step further than I've than we may have seen anywhere else.
Well, it was really just because what I wanted it to be made. So it's set now. I mean, I guess it'll probably inevitably date, but I didn't want it to be futuristic. I wanted it to be now, and now was, it was the time of the Green Revolution in Tehran, and images were coming through on cell phones and constantly all the time. I mean, all the time people are photographing and doing video clips, and it just seemed it was part of the world we're in, that any politician going down the street would be videoed and photographed and recorded.
And what about the idea of bringing in TV analysts as the chorus?
Well, that was really one. I mean, there were many great ideas in this that are from John Logan, and that was one of them, because there were constant messenger moments in the play where people run on with news. But it was, in a way, it was staring us in the face, but it was John who put it on the page to say, look, these should be news announcers. And funnily enough, there's a scene in it where we have sort of pundits discussing the pros and cons of Coriolanus, which was in an earlier draft. Then we thought we had to take it out because we just had to start being leaner about things. And then actually when we were editing it, my editor, Nick Gaster, said, we need something to contextualize a sort of political argument that's going on. And I showed him this earlier draft. And so we then went to the BBC, who actually have contributed to this film, but we used the BBC studios and had Jon Snow, who is, in fact, a Channel 4 news presenter, come in. And he did. And actually, no, that's right. We were always going to shoot Jon Snow. We hadn't shot him, but we used that schedule to create this little scene with the two pundits discussing.
We've got time for a couple more questions, so please stick up your hand if you have one. Got one right here.
Yes, I have another question for Ralph Fiennes. What do you think Ralph Fiennes, the actor, thinks of Ralph Fiennes, the director, and what Ralph Fiennes, the director, thinks about Ralph Fiennes, the actor?
I think Rafe, the actor, wished the director had given him more time, because he was always moving on, focusing on other people. And I think the director looks at the performance and thanks everyone else around him that they managed to save the performance with the good editing and good angles. Thanks to a good editor, the director's very grateful to the editor for putting together some kind of performance.
Rafe, one of the stunning things in the movie was the amount of firepower early on in the film. Could you talk a bit about that and also the contrast to the relatively quiet nature of the violence and the suicide in the latter half of the film? You talk about contrasting the look and feel of those two elements?
I suppose some of it emerged just in post-production. I mean, I think my editor Nick and I felt, and I definitely felt you wanted the rawness of that, what it is to hear explosions and guns, and it's amped up a bit, I think, in the volume. I mean, the mix definitely needs to feel, the audience slightly feel it really present. And then it's a different nature. The violence at the end it's knives. But it's more emotional. I mean, it's more intimate. It's something else. It's not just about a convincing death. It's a weird kind of love affair over. It's sort of. It's a death. It's something sexual. It's something intimate. So I think, and we just tried different things, and in the end, in the mix, we just tried taking the sound right out.
And Brian, maybe you can talk about the suicide of Menenius a little bit, and Rafe chime in on how you guys came up with the visual look of that, and
It's a major spoiler, by the way. Talk about your suicide.
Yeah.
Oh, that happens.
It's just very simple. I mean, the nice thing was that, for me, the part had a completion, which it doesn't in the play. Because in the play, he doesn't. He just sort of fades off into the ether. Whereas here, there was an absolute conclusion to the events that had happened. And it was tragically logical conclusion, really. And it was just with simplicity, really, wasn't it? It was just very simple and very, it was about a man who put all his money on this, and it's it's a very complex relationship, the relationship between Menenius and Coriolanus. And in the end, he's just, he runs out, he's overbacked the horse and it hasn't come up, and he's got nothing in reverse.
Well, that is a bit of a spoiler, but it's Shakespearean tragedy, things aren't going to end well.
Star, I have a question for both Jessica and Gerard. When you have movies coming out nose to nose, back to back, and you're trying to promote them, do you feel kind of sad for one of the movies being overshadowed by the other, or that you can't give your whole to it because you have to pay attention to the next one that's coming out? I mean, 2 big movies, 2 nights in a row. No wonder you're tired. But would you like them to have been spread out more, and that you could really devote yourself to them and to their promotion and to loving them?
Yeah, I with The Help and The Debt especially, that was a situation where The Help had just opened and it was so wonderful and so successful, and everyone was embracing it. And then I started the press junket for The Debt, which is a film that I really love, and a lot of the questions people wanted to talk about The Help. So I did find myself trying to somehow steer it back, and thank goodness The Debt did well, because then I would feel like I was a mother that was, choosing one child over the other. It's a complicated thing. But then someone else told me that perhaps The Help helped The Debt. So I guess there are negatives and positives with that. Just the sense of exposure can shine the light on a film that perhaps not that many people would have seen had they not seen the first one.
Yeah, no, I think like Jessica says, I think in the bigger picture, when you have a couple of movies close together, then it definitely spurs some kind of extra excitement, which helps, which kind of bleeds into each movie. But without a doubt, it affects the effort that you can give to each. And this has been, I joke about that feeling this morning, but really, this has actually been an exhausting time for me, because I'm in the middle of a press tour all over America for Machine Gun Preacher, and then trying to do this, and I start another movie in October where I'm trying to become an incredible surfer, and be like the all-American kind of beach bum Californian guy, and do 2 days reshoots on my previous movie, and do this press junket also in the UK, and do that. I literally don't have a day off until I start the next film, and then I don't have a day off from that. So it's that's tough, but at the same time, it's kind of a great place to be as well. I mean, these 2 days, this time in Toronto has been very intense, but it's like it's like that when you're living it like that, you know it's going well, and it's also been a really, really exciting time for me to be involved with both these movies. I just wish I could have given them a bit more love.
All right, Coriolanus is a TIFF special presentation that will make its festival premiere tonight in the Visa screening room at the Elgin Theater. If there are no more questions, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.